Well, hello, friends, and welcome back to Spaces Between. It has been a long time since I've been on this microphone. It's been actually 8.5 months, and I think it's pretty hilarious that I thought I was going to start this podcast right back up after the first of the year, after having Carlo in December of 2022, and pretty impossible after having a baby. Because as I've realized, going through birth and becoming a mother has been pretty similar to doing a heavy-ass dose of psychedelics slapped on with a cocktail of MDMA. My heart has exploded beyond any normal level of ecstatic capacity. And I've also had moments where I feel like my feet are not on this earthly ground of reality. My ego structure and old identity getting blown open in the most beautiful, shocking, and otherworldly ways. Moments where I've wanted to get off of this trip of parenting and go back to my old life. And moments where I have met such different aspects of myself that I'm semi-awestruck that I've touched and dug into such different layers of my being. Softening and loving my son so deeply in moments where I thought my well was so dry physically and emotionally after giving birth, being sleep deprived, and trying to heal postpartum. What you think you know about yourself and life are challenged, at least for me, on a weekly basis. The shadow material and the old saying that children are mirrors for you is beyond. And I have an 8.5-month-old baby. I cannot imagine when he's 16. So I guess I wanted to start with the lessons that I gleaned from the birth of my son and move through the different lessons up until this current moment of Carlo at 8.5 months. Also, I highly suggest listening to the episode before this as I talked about being in the liminal space between before giving birth, which reminded me of the space before my mom passed away as a teenager. It is a similar energy that feels completely overwhelming, raw, vulnerable, and it is the ultimate surrender to the unknown. I couldn't intellectualize, intuit, control, or understand the magnitude of watching my mom take her last breath, or my son taking his first breath upon physically entering the world. As humans, when we visit these transitional spaces, it is a massive reminder that as much as we want to control or predict the outcome of these experiences, how they will look, feel emotionally, or just unfold, life generally offers you something else. It is the full circle and intricate design of life. So, the first massive massive lesson that I received from Carlo's birth was humility. And I'm going to emphasize humility again. I'm really going to back up to who I was before my son's birth. I was the woman reading every possible book on natural labor, even orgasmic and ecstatic births. I was meditating, visualizing, and even seeing images of myself having an ecstatic home birth. Friends around me were telling me how strong I was, and this was going to be the most beautiful and epic experience of my life. And I deeply felt it in my bones that it would be. But life and my son had different lessons for me to experience. And as much as I wrote about opening up to these lessons from the universe in my last episode, I wasn't fully digesting the possibility that things could go differently for me. And yes, I can 100% admit my ego being involved and my gripped attachment to what my birth would look and feel like. As one nurse said to me, the only plan to have in giving birth is to not have a plan. And I was thinking, yeah, boo, but not for me. So let's first talk about due dates for a second. They are a rough guesstimate of when your child is going to enter the world and can be wildly off base. Most women who give birth for the first time go well over their due date. I was one of those women. Without me going into a long-winded monologue about the pressure women can feel to give birth before or exactly on their due date, it's a whole thing. Ina May Gaskin, who is probably one of the most famous midwives in America, believes that a woman should be able to go 3 weeks post their due date and has fought for this. Carlo decided to come almost 2.5 weeks late, and my midwife and I had what I would call a come to Jesus discussion. The amount of anxiety around me was next level. I knew friends and family members were nervous and probably even judging my decision of how long I was allowing Carlo to quote unquote cook in me. There was an extraordinary amount of stress and a lot of people checking in. It was all extremely well-intentioned, but also spoke to a deeper narrative around a woman not being able to trust herself, be in her power, her body, or her intuition. I was getting ultrasounds to check on Carlo's amniotic fluids, seeing an OBGYN, and getting non-stress tests from my midwife. Everything with Carlo looked healthy and fine, and I felt on every level that he was okay, but I couldn't handle the outside pressure and the stress of surrounding people and OBs talking about stillbirths. I didn't want to be the home birth martyr, but I still felt unbelievably sad about not listening to a deeper knowing in myself, which has taken me a long time to process. Women have long been trained in a patriarchal society to override their knowing with a capital K. Now, for those of you that this discussion is already triggering different parts, I understand that completely. Pregnancy and birth are complicated and can be gnarly, quoted by my midwife. And I know how many women and babies have died in childbirth. I am not naive enough to think that pushing it much further could have been absolutely detrimental to Carlo or my health. But there still was this override of my intuition with all of the surrounding energetic fear. So fast forward to castor oil inductions, acupuncture, cervical sweeps, everything that was incredibly uncomfortable, and just trying to nudge my son out of me in a quote unquote natural way. My midwife and I made the call to force him out with an induction, and we made an appointment for the hospital that night after all other attempts failed. And I'd like to share this letter with you that I wrote to Carlo on the beach 5 days before. I said, Carlo, your due date was November 12th, and it's now 15 days past. I have done everything to gently urge you out of the womb, but you seem to really like it in there. Or it's the cliche thing that everyone says to me to make me feel better. Maybe it feels scary to come out into the world, and I get that. The womb is a cozy and safe space where all of your needs are met: food, shelter, oxygen, and you are held and surrounded by me. Once you come out of the womb, there will be bright lights, loud noises, and your own personal navigation in the world. School, playtime, social relationships, love, heartbreak, sickness, growing pains, big joys, big sorrows, etc. The school of life is awesome, but it is also incredibly hard and painful. I'm getting a really hard lesson right now. I'm trying my damnedest to surrender to letting you come out on your own clock and your own terms. But I also hear the terrifying words of the OBGYN who says, you are 41 years old, which makes you a geriatric pregnancy, Gina, and your risk of stillbirth increases after 40 weeks. Well, you are officially 42 weeks cook, and in the land of modern medicine, you should have already been induced, Carlo. But I haven't yet, and I've had to boldly trust myself and my team. The other day, my midwife said you were showing off for me during the testing. We both had a really good laugh under the external stress, and of course, wanting to make the right decision for you and I. I have cried a lot, worried that I'll wait too long, holding on to a home birth. But that may or may not work out, and I'm learning a fat ass lesson once again that we do not control life or the birthing process. Just like parenting, I don't and I won't have control of you. You are your own person and your own soul having your own experience on this planet. I'm here to lovingly guide, nurture, and support you. You will have to show me who you are. I already love you. Oh my God, I'm going to cry. I already love you so much, Carlo, and I just want you to have a safe and beautiful entry on your way out of me into the world. So we majorly fast forward to a birth that couldn't have been further from my intuition's wants and desires. But I was reminded during the process how privileged I was to have good health insurance, care, and to be supported in a way that so many women don't receive. I am endlessly grateful for that. It also opened up a well of rage inside of me that so many women, particularly women of color, who continue to receive appalling medical care in a system steeped in systemic racism. Dr. Aviva Romm states, when a Black woman enters the maternal health system, she faces a multitude of biases and risks. Regardless of her health, financial, or educational background, she is more likely to be disregarded, her symptoms ignored or dismissed, and her needs neglected. This results in her and her baby being disproportionately more susceptible to preventable complications and having a significantly higher mortality rate than their white counterparts in the same room. Also, further by Dr. Aviva Romm, she says as many as 45% of women giving birth in the U.S. right now report experiencing some form of medical mistreatment, and as many as 1 in 6 experience birth trauma and even diagnosable PTSD as a result. After my birth, I went to see my midwife several weeks later. I didn't want anyone in my house for almost a month after, not even her. I needed to process a lot, and I truly honored the sacredness and rawness of the space where I just needed to feel it all, to process my own ignorance towards the magnitude of the birthing process, but also still believe that women can be in their power and birth on their own terms within a system that equally supports all women. But my midwife put it the best. She said, I've been doing this for almost 40 years, Gina, and this is what I stand by. Birth can be unbelievably gnarly, complicated. It can move really quickly or painfully slow. It can be a deeply traumatic experience, and it can also be an unbelievably beautiful one. She said, I've had clients in the past who will override the non-stress testing or my suggestions that they are in the red zone and need hospital intervention. And they have landed themselves in disastrous situations, and I have attended funerals for babies from their unwillingness to let go of their plan. It's a balance of a woman being in her power while also knowing when interventions are necessary. That is the beauty of modern medicine, testing, and the right interventions. And we must also honor the process of home birthing and a woman being in her power for choosing that way to birth on her own terms. And it's interesting, as I write this podcast out, I'm now realizing that I don't need to share all of the details of my birth. What I can say is that it was wild, intense, one of the hardest things I've ever gone through physically and mentally and emotionally and spiritually in my life. But I also had moments of deep beauty and peaceful release, like almost these lifetimes of emotional release as a woman. And there were moments of power and moments where I felt I couldn't go any further. The duality of that energy danced for what felt like an eternity and has merged into the beginning stages of parenting to some degree. In the first 2 months of processing my birth, I thought I was traumatized from it, and perhaps I was. But further out from it, I realized it was my deep grip and grief on releasing a plan that was not for me to control and walking away from a level of intuitive knowing that rattled a large piece of feminine wounding in me. I cried over that a lot, but it was also an incredibly empowering and healing experience for my relationship with my partner, who was the only doula I needed in the room and was again the most massive lesson in humility, surrendering to the moment, and giving myself compassion throughout the process and the choices that I made. So now I'm going to segue into early motherhood. So I will never forget this one week in particular where my hair started falling out in huge clumps, as it does in the 4th month postpartum. Carlo had a raging ear infection and was level 10, losing it, crying, screaming, kicking for 5 hours, starting at about 1 or 2 in the morning. And Jonas and I having no idea what was wrong with him, to then my milk supply dropping that week from stress, emotional overload, and introducing the bottle nightly for Jonas so that I could start to sleep, to then experiencing deep mom guilt over so many things, then getting on social media as a distraction and reading about people's easy babies, those that sleep through the night, tap dance in the morning while their diaper is changed, and they are only sunshine in their parents' lives. Best decision they ever made in their life. And I'm joking and not joking about the often one-sided representation of mothering online. Motherhood is all of the things. And sunshine all day has not been my honest experience. Throw in some torrential downpours and thunder and lightning while you feel like Jack Nicholson in One Who Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest from not sleeping for month after month after month. So here are my top honest themes that have come to the surface in these last 8.5 months as a new mom. Number 1. The death of self and your old identity isn't just a one-time thing, because by nature, any type of grief is not linear. I have mourned off and on about my old identity, my body, previous life, flexibility, freedom, and not having to manage 8,000 things what feels like every day. And then I honestly don't think about it at all because this old version of myself and now the time and presence that I have in parenting brings me so deeply into the present moment, partly out of survival, that this new version of me, I'm kind of sometimes dumbfounded with the level of growth and self-evolution I've gone through. It's honestly next level. And it's really, really fucking hard. It's kind of like bring you to your knees kind of growth, tears, grieving, and awesomeness. Number 2, going back to the managing 8,000 things brings me to my very big feelings around privilege and resources. I write about birth and motherhood as a white woman with a middle to upper level salary each year. This is not lost on me. My partner Jonas and I have a great life, and I'm extremely grateful and appreciative for everything that we have. But we don't have family nearby, and we couldn't afford to bring any extra childcare on for the first 5 months as working freelance individuals. It was just us in the beginning. And for any of you that have done that, and people do way longer than 5 months without any support because there is no financial option to get help, it is a lot of work, and to stay financially afloat and raise a baby is incredibly stressful. And one of the things as parents that we should be focusing on the most is secure attachment, and so that you are able to attune in a healthy and self-regulated way. I really remember loving the idea and concept of the first 40 days, where a woman doesn't cook, clean, or really move aside from breastfeeding and sleeping. What an incredibly spiritual and privileged experience. I kid. And I'm not meaning to shame anything or anyone, but just pointing out some of just the non-reality in this for so many people. Unless you have family support, that village nearby, or hired help, that is damn near impossible. Jonas was an absolutely incredible partner and cooked and cleaned while I nursed Carlo all day, but he also needed help once he started working again. So then I started cooking, cleaning, nursing, and everything in between while my body was still really needing to heal. Jonas took off 1 month of work, and then I started to see clients when Carlo was 2 months old, and it was too early, which brings me to my incredibly fired up feelings for single mothers, those that live in poverty and are not supported by this country steeped in systemic racism. Our country does not support postpartum care for new family systems. I've actually heard from other friends, I feel like Americans complain so much about parenting. You want to know why? We're not resourced. There's no help. You need money to get this help. And this brings me to, again, the most essential time of bonding, secure attachment, and creating that family system for society. So whether you get hired help, family help, this creates an entirely different experience for your family who has to work to survive. Stress is less, and your time spent with your child is more enjoyable because you get a break and you need a break. It does truly take a village to raise your child well, and unfortunately, most people can't afford that. Clients have often asked me in sessions, how, Gina, do we begin to heal our society? And I'm like, fuck, I don't know. The violence, the divisiveness, the reactivity, the individualism, and greed. It is an incredibly complicated answer, but I believe it starts foundationally in the family system. It starts by healing cycles of intergenerational trauma. It starts by parents getting help and support from our government. It starts by making education and mental health priorities over making the Kardashians one of the richest families in the country. And I'm not shaming the Kardashians or who they are, but rather our values are incredibly out of whack in this country and globally. It's not just America. Families need more of a communal network of support versus the isolated nuclear family system. One of my longtime friends who is brilliant and a loving, amazing father and also works at Stanford as a psychologist, him and I have talked ad nauseum about how the nuclear family system is an antiquated paradigm that is too draining, too individually focused, and children can benefit from learning and being supported and cared for by others. It can't just be the two parents doing everything. And that's why statistically, people who have children are less happy than those who don't. I love my son so goddamn much, but I can definitely vouch for times of stress and exhaustion that were some of the lowest points in my life. Jonas and I both needing lifelines and our bandwidth being stretched to the maximum. Moving on to number 3. You surrender each day to the total unknown, and it is the largest spiritual initiation I have ever gone through. And again, that's not to say that other people don't go through deep spiritual initiations in their life. This is just for me personally. Something I've also realized in this number 3 is there are no guarantees with your child who you love more than anything in the world that they will survive each day. Jonas and I had a moment where our son went to the hospital in Mexico, and I literally thought I was going to black out emotionally and physically on the way to the hospital because I didn't know if I could survive any potential loss of my son. Because that's where the mom brain goes on top of outrageous claims from this particular hospital, which turned out to be a terribly off-base and hyperbolic evaluation of the situation at hand. But it was my first huge lesson as a mother of Carlo's impermanence, a body that can get sick, and ultimately his mortality. Number 4, women are still playing out and living from their feminine wounding from the patriarchy, and often very unconsciously. And I say that lovingly and compassionately because I do it. We are all doing our damn best to heal it as women, but it is a tough journey and a long journey, particularly if you are aware of it playing out in your day-to-day. As women and as mothers, we are never perfect enough, good enough, and we often stay in this martyr position with our children where sacrifice is the entire experience. And yes, sacrifice and a level of selflessness is part of it, but not losing yourself completely and judging or comparing yourself to other mothers and how they do motherhood. But mothers definitely bring this often unconscious element of the patriarchy in subtle or not so subtle shaming of another woman for not breastfeeding, co-sleeping, school choices, sleep training, styles of parenting. The list goes on and on. Which brings me to number 5. Opinions. Opinions. When you get pregnant and you're going to birth a human and become a parent, holy shit. There are more opinions on what you should do as a new mom than there are selfies on Instagram, which feels like a lot to sift through and navigate. And that somehow these choices will fuck up your kids for the rest of their life, to breastfeed or not, or maybe you just can't physically do it. Sleep training, co-sleeping, etc., etc., etc. And of course, I know the importance of the first 3 years of development on the foundation of mental health as a therapist, but there is also the rest of their life that will impact them. My therapist said to me, Gina, you have a 50-50 chance of fucking up your kid with every choice you make. Do you want to wrestle with every single one? I recently said to one of my clients who was also mirroring my similar feelings of comparison with other moms, we're like, are we getting it right? Like, are we really getting motherhood right? Let's fucking be real, people. As humans, we all live and we do life very differently. We do parenting differently. Different cultural, socioeconomic, educational, and religious backgrounds. We all make very, very, very different choices in our lives. We do relationships, careers, sex, life, travel, how we take care of our bodies, how we like to play, and how we like to pray, all quite differently. We are dynamically human. We will each parent uniquely. But similar to the discussions that I felt that were so black and white in 2020, parenting is not black and white. It's nuanced. You have to trust your intuition and know your child. If there's anything that birth and parenting has taught me is that some of our choices are out of our control. And that is it's just real. I never thought I'd have a hospital birth. And I know how like shitty and egoic that sounds. That's what a lot of this episode is about. And my son preferring the bottle to formula, and then me experiencing a huge well of deep grief and shame that to some degree I was relieved to be done with the full-time job of breastfeeding, to then in the same exact breath miss the depth and the incredible connection of it with my son. So I also thought I'd be co-sleeping with my baby until I literally thought I was on the brink of losing my mind. And he was such a wild sleeper, and he was on my boobs all night, to then doing hours and hours of different styles of sleep training or sleep teaching, whatever you want to call it, which I was always vehemently opposed to in the beginning. I found a method through 2 licensed trained therapists backed by Dr. Dan Siegel. And I tried the method, and it honestly broke my soul to listen to my son cry for that long of a period and come in with this scripted response. So I created my own method of getting my son down, which I felt was gentler on him and me. And this is not to shame anybody who sleep trains or co-sleeps or whatever you do, but this was a huge lesson for me that I needed to listen to my needs and my son's needs. And on a last note, do I think that we know things in the world of neuroscience, attachment, and psychology that parents didn't know 10, 20, 30, 40 years ago? Yeah, 100%. I do think our choices matter, 1,000,000%. But we must forgive and be compassionate to ourselves when we fuck up or we make the wrong decisions with the best intentions. Absolutely. But the main thing we must do for our children is to show up and love them and attune to them and set healthy boundaries and let them feel their feelings and explore their feelings, and creating a safe and consistent space for these little people to be guided on their trajectory in life. Number 6, can we talk about the impact of the first year of parenting on your relationship? Holy shit. Jonas and I have talked about how we have experienced the highest of highs and the lowest of lows as new parents. You experience a level of bone-tired exhaustion that is one of the reasons Guantanamo Bay uses sleep deprivation as torture, along with the soundtrack of a baby crying. Well, that's your life now. You are welcome. And your nervous system becomes frayed and completely overstimulated and oversensitive from this. Even my dog barking would send me into a near meltdown after sleepless nights and just wanting my baby to nap. Oh yeah, and what about all of that just hot sex with your partner? And that 6-week approval from your doctor that after you pushed out an 8.5-pound baby out of your vagina, and your hormones all over the place, and the meals to be cooked and the clients to be seen and a house to clean, poopy diapers, bottle making, nap times, and then just trying to brush your teeth and shower. There is so much energy and chi flowing out of you to your baby. You are touched out. You are kissed out. And while it's beautiful and incredible, you need to find time for yourself and putting the energy back into your relationship. The consistent negotiation of time, energy, and scheduling with the other person. You don't want to become tit for tat. Oh, I've been watching the baby for 3 hours, but it happens. You get tired. And yeah, your shadow material shows up intensely. At least ours did as a couple. The wounds from our childhoods, how our parents raised us, and the mirror that is held by your baby and your partner becomes amplified. Jonas and I had a long talk and on multiple nights. And one night we both really broke down about these parts of ourselves that we just don't really like. And they've become so amplified. It's like they're screaming as parents. And how do we actually bring compassion, space, and breath to those parts of ourselves that we don't want to look at? We are both still figuring it out. And it's hard, but again, the growth is massive. And our love for each other is still huge, but there have been deeply difficult times as new parents. Number 7, hormones, hormones, hormones. Why doesn't this country and a lot of the world care about women and their hormones? Hormones are gnarly and they dictate how we feel, if we look at life with a lot of color or not a lot of color. Women need support and help in the shifting states of hormones in postpartum. And it is not discussed enough, and women don't understand why they are having intrusive thoughts or depression or severe anxiety when hormones dip and fluctuate for a multitude of reasons. And it's not a priority in this medical system because we're not a priority, and that has to change. We birth humanity. Number 8, control. Ooh, Jonas and I's level of control has grown from the state of pure chaos of raising a little one. Also, the woman's brain changes after birth. The amygdala grows larger for a new mom. Hence, the actual worry and anxiety center of the brain expands. This is linked to more control, obsessive thinking, and it's in the beginning of postpartum and can go on. I am still learning to just let go, and let go some more. Number 9, the invisible labor. And I'm not just saying this for women. This could be for a single father, for anybody. And on all ends, and really recognizing and appreciating each partner who is raising a human. Number 10, you are in an entirely new relationship with your friends, your partner, your family. This is a new version of you, and that can be jarring for everybody, including yourself. They might want the old version of you, and that version, quite simply, is gone. Number 11, did I mention that you will grow, and grow some more? And growing is awesome and sometimes ridiculously uncomfortable, and it feels physically painful, even when it's just emotional. Number 12, a deep and wild connection to the life cycle. Number 13, As I wrap this up, do I know that maybe I sound extreme about some of these things or black and white? Of course. Yes. And maybe I've triggered the shit out of some of you. Absolutely. And that not everyone sounds this way with parenting. And for maybe somebody, they are just shitting rainbows and unicorns. Of course, our experiences in parenting are different. But I'll guarantee two things. Lots of support from family or hired help and money. And we need to recognize this. And I'm sorry if that offends you and if that's your truth. It helps dispel and distribute responsibility and energy, making more enjoyable and joyous parents being able to be present and attuned to their children. And you don't need to be rich, but new parents need support from other humans. I feel like I've really sent this point home in this podcast episode. And of course, we need food, clean water, good healthcare, mental health care options, housing, etc. Number 14, lastly, I hesitate to write this last statement because I find that mothers need to make these declarative statements about like, oh, I love my child more than anything and I wouldn't do life another way, especially if we're saying disparaging things about motherhood, because that's not very ladylike, now is it? But I'm here to be real and honest, and this has been my experience. And here, I just want to share my personal truths and experiences. So maybe it helps you, or maybe it hits some part in your heart or your soul that you're like, fuck, I've always wanted to say this, but I haven't felt like I could. And again, these may or may not align with your experience in life and in motherhood. And that's the beauty of life. They don't have to. And if there's anything I know about motherhood and life is nothing is black and white. Nothing about the journey of life is ever linear, always good, easy, happy, and joyous. That is social media and the constant branding and marketing of sellable lives in our world. There is money and product behind that or courses to sell. Real life is downright messy and it is brilliantly colored with big moments of joy. The polarities and paradoxes that exist in life and mothering Carlo have truly been some of the most epic experiences in my life. But would I ever make the disclaimer that it is always easy, seamless, and full of joy? Fuck no. I've cried more this year than I have in years, both in overwhelm and happiness. I never have experienced so much softening and hardening with myself. I've had days where I so desperately want to go back to my life of carefree surfing, long lunch dates with friends, hour-long meditation, and days where I think about just me, my life, and my mental health. It was luxurious and delicious in its own right, but that was a season of my life and it's past. I've had to embrace this new season of nap schedules, tons of time at home, massive growth pains, and a downright cosmic experience of staring into my son's eyes or sharing a big laugh with him. I wouldn't change a thing. And number 15, some notes from a therapy session with my therapist. I hope these help you. Relax. Kids are resilient, and building resiliency in them is what matters the most. They will experience pain, discomfort, emotional scars, and we can't keep them covered in a cotton blanket of protection their whole life. If you are a conscious parent, then you are doing something right. If you are looking at your shit and not projecting on your child all day, you are doing another beautiful thing. Why suffer in advance with parenting? Don't tell the future of a dark story that they will be messed up in the future. We don't know what's already written in the stars for our children, or the mishaps or terrible relationships that they will have to go through to truly become themselves. Let them show you who they are. Just show up and love them. That is the best thing you can do. Number 16, that everything is spirit, the discomfort, the love, the joy, and the pain. Thank you so much for tuning in and listening, sending you all love and compassion into the rest of your day. Thanks so much. Hi, friends. If you have been enjoying Spaces Between, please take a moment to subscribe, and leaving a review is the cherry on top. Thank you so much, and I look forward to connecting with you next week.